Jim Crow! Bury Jim Crow! Bury Jim Crow! Bury Jim Crow! Bury Jim! Here we are today. And I want to ask everybody to repeat this after me. Let the dead, bury the dead. Throughout America's history, America, North Carolina has had to recognize that some policies once had life, but they needed to die. Because those policies, those public policies, had no life in them, no liberty in them, and no future in them. And so there was a time in America, 1896, the Supreme Court said separate but equal was constitutional. But in 1954, with the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision, an all-white Supreme Court with justices from the South understood that segregation in public education was a destructive policy, and it had to be buried. And so on May 17, 1954, it was buried so that America could live and began to move into a new future. Let the dead bury the dead. There also was a time in the United States when women could not hold certain jobs, when women were banned from jobs such as construction jobs, when women could not get the same pay as a man simply because of their gender. But America had to come to understand that it could not live cutting off half or more than half of its society, that it could not be a prosperous nation as long as it treated men one way and women another. So rules had to be enacted. That side of history had to die. And aren't we glad that it died? Yeah. Let the dead bury the dead. There was a time in 1959 in that General Assembly right there. There were no African Americans, because in 1901 white supremacy was rewritten into the laws of North Carolina. The 1898 riots had canceled out fusion politics. By 1901, the last congressman who was black, who was at the United States Congress, was driven out. White supremacy was reinstituted in our Constitution. There were no African Americans in 1959 in this General Assembly, and there were only 4 women in the General Assembly at that time. But we have moved as a state, and we have moved as a nation because people recognize that those old policies had to die. So now we have a Senator Kennard, where's Senator? Right here with us, and a host of other women. We have a host of African Americans, not as many as we had in 1868, 69, and 70, but it's growing. Now we have a more diverse General Assembly because there comes a time that we must let the dead. And so now we're here because in this legislature, in 1959, 50 years ago, there were no blacks, only 4 women, and there was a fear that unions would organize with African Americans. Let's get it true. The story they said was they were afraid that firemen would be organized in Charlotte. But actually what the truth is, there was a fear that northern unions would work in the civil rights movement in the South and organize black folk. Because of that fear, an all-white legislature voted and passed GS 9598, making it illegal for people to talk together across the aisle in state government. This was a time when my grandparents, at best, working in state government, could have been garbage workers or housekeepers or groundskeepers or other menial jobs. But it's time to take this Jim Crow law off the books. It should have never been on the books. 40 years ago, Martin Luther King went to Memphis twice because he was fighting that sanitation workers, that public employees would have the right to collective bargaining. Think about it now. Here we are, a diverse group out here today, white, black, women, and men. Now we have a law on the books that's 50 years too old that was put on the books to stop blacks, but now it's hurting everybody. Now it's hurting everybody. In 2009, we're in the worst economic crisis we've seen in our lifetime. The governor and many of the friends in the legislature are trying to deal with this issue. But let's step back for a minute as we wrestle with the money issues. Who provides the services in our state? Policemen, the fire services, the firemen, emergency services, emergency workers, teachers, mental health care, all of them. You all are the people that make this state work. And this state has a draconian law on the book that does not allow you to talk with your employer. We have a president of the United States that believes in collective bargaining. The Democratic Party's platform endorses collective bargaining. We know that this law needs to be changed. It was put on for the wrong reason. It's being kept on for the wrong reason. Some are saying in the legislature, if you pass this law, then firemen and policemen will be able to strike. But we know that's propaganda. That's a distortion of the truth. This law simply says that public workers would have the same right as private workers to be able to organize and to talk with their employers. There are some people that say, well, we don't need this to happen in this state of North Carolina, but it's happened everywhere else in the country. Only 2 states are holding on to Jim Crow. Virginia and North Carolina. Only 2 states are keeping Jim Crow up and holding on to a past that's dead. Only 2 states keep resuscitating the past. But it's time in North Carolina to let the dead bury the dead. So it's time. We say it from the east. We say it from the west. We say it from the north. We say it from the south. We say it black. We say it white. We say it young. We say it old. We say it in labor. We say it in civil rights. Let the dead bury the dead. Do the right thing, General Assembly. Do the right thing, senators. Do the right things, representatives, and bury this Jim Crow law and let us move into a better future. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. We want 95, 98 to stop messing with us. Jim Crow, bury 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 Jim. We got to close it and say to the General Assembly, it's time to close the door on an ugly past. It's time to close the door on fear and the roots of racism and classism, and it's time to let the dead bury the dead. Take it off the books, North Carolina, and North Carolina will be true to its motto, one North Carolina, to be and not to seem. God bless you. Thank you.